Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you, Evan.
Great. We got folks on board. Are we planning on moving into this quick?
Are we? Okay, I'm finally getting audio.
Are you ready to go, Mary?
Yes, I wasn't getting audio for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I will call this meeting, Grand County Special Meeting, on June 30th, 2020. The time is 3 o'clock. The people present are Mary McGann, County Council Member, Chris Bear, County Administrator, Mallory Nassau, Assistant County Administrator, Greg Halliday, Brandon Bradford, Carter Page, Dennis Brown, Evan Clapper, County Council Member, Gabriel Wojtek, Jalen Hawks, County Council Members. Curtis Wells said he would be here later, that he will be a bit late. We are citizens to be heard. You may dial in at 669-900-833. Meeting ID 868-5577-2562. Number. Password 915505. Do we have anyone in the waiting room, Chris?
Chris, you're muted.
Is there anybody that would like to speak as a citizen to be heard?
Yes, please.
Password 915505.
Turn that down, please.
Yeah, so everyone that's on this meeting, make sure that your YouTube is muted, because it
Thank you.
lags the actual live feed of this meeting by about 20 or 30 seconds.
I did
Go
that.
ahead, Mark.
Thank you for meeting today, this special occasion. I just want to thank the council for coming out with a requesting the citizens of Grand County to respect their neighbors on the 4th of July with regards to illegal fireworks. The fireworks are illegal everywhere, is my understanding, even though the city of Moab is required to sell, provide licenses to sell fireworks. But I'm saying thank you to the county council for imploring the citizens to respect their neighbors' rights, property rights, and the rule of law that America is founded upon. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing some version of the Pledge of Allegiance to defend our Constitution and for a nation indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You guys have a good day.
Is there anyone else? Seeing no one, we will move to council disclosures. I do not have anything to close this meeting. Holiday.
I would like to be heard, but there's a delay.
Okay, go ahead. All right, there's another citizen to be heard.
Citizen to be heard. Yes. State your name.
My name is Lori McFarland.
Go ahead, Lori.
Go ahead.
I'm concerned that we create laws that will be difficult for law enforcement to enforce at a time when there's so much strife with law enforcement. And I think it's important that we create legislation that's effective, but not superfluous, and continue to allow people to make smart, conscious, healthful choices rather than mandating those choices. I prefer that we don't ask law enforcement to enforce things that are very impossible to enforce. That's all.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else? Is there anyone else? It looks as though there's no one else, so I will council disclosures. Greg Halliday,
None.
Jalen Hawks,
No, none for me. Sorry about that.
the joy of Zoom. Do you have any disclosure? Evan Clapper,
None pertaining to this agenda, no disclosures.
Gail Wojtek,
None.
I do not see, has Curtis Welch joined the meeting yet, Chris? No?
Mary Curtis is on there.
He is? Okay, he's on there. Curtis?
Yes.
Have any disclosures
No, not that I'm aware of that I need.
for this agenda? Okay, thank you, thank you. We will move to our first discussion item. Discussion on the possible restructuring, building inspection, planning and zoning, and active transportation and trails as divisions under the Department of Grand County Community Development Department. Council Administrator Baird.
So, yeah, this is just a discussion item at this point, and it kind of dovetails in a little bit with later action item in amending what's currently the Community and Economic Development Director's job description. This actually ties in with a broader, issue, which is that the county's organizational chart in general is very flat. What we call departments are actually divisions, and we don't really truly have any departments. All these divisions report more or less directly to the council administrator's office. And it's not really an ideal form or structure for an organization not to have both departments and divisions. Departments are typically groupings of divisions that are similar and have to work together. And so in this particular case, with Zachariah moving into another position within the community but outside our organization, it provides an opportunity to consider creating a true community development department and then providing the divisions under that department, which makes sense as a grouping. As long as I've been working for the county, I've been aware of some inefficiencies and some lack of coordination, quite honestly, between the building department and planning and zoning. And, Mallory and I have been kind of investigating some of the details of how permitting occurs in the building department, how that dovetails in with the process of planning and zoning. And, what's happening is that because the direct reports are coming to the council administrator's office, Mallory and I are sort of serving as that department head role, which is fine as long as you don't expect us also to fill the role of chief executive, and drive strategy and work on larger and bigger picture ideas and concepts, moving the county as a whole forward and towards the council's strategic plan. And it's long been sort of an issue of mine that the council administrators never really had the time available to act as a chief executive because all the detail work that goes into functioning as essentially the department head for 14 direct reports or more. And so it's something that I see really needs to be changed, not only in this particular grouping, but all across the entire county. We really need to establish departments and divisions. It's a best practice, and I think it would be a lot more efficient. This is just coming up again because Zachariah is changing positions within the community, leaving this organization. So it's easier to make these kind of changes at this point in time than it is any other point in time. And I do realize, that these are kind of awkward discussions to have in open session, but I'm a big believer that this organizational structure of government really should be discussed in open session. And so that's why, I think that we should just, discuss these things as long as, we're not bringing up anybody's particular professional character and competence, which I don't think any is in question here. It's more a matter of just strictly the organization itself. So that's really the point I'm trying to make, is that all of these divisions have to work fairly closely together, especially the building department and planning and zoning. And I see a need for some enhanced coordination between those departments, enhanced project management needs. And I feel like because the council administrator's office is the tie between those two, what are essentially divisions, that it kind of ends up falling on Mallory and I to try to figure out some of this coordination, where ideally there would be a department head that would be responsible for understanding all the details associated with these two departments, exactly how they dovetail together, what needs to happen with regard to software, project management, that kind of thing. And that way Mallory and I don't get bogged down in the weeds as previous council administrators have done, and frees us up to work on, bigger picture needs and move the county strategic plan forward. So I'll open it up for discussion from other council members or staff.
Is there anyone who would like to comment?
Mary, I would.
Yes, great.
Yeah, I would like to ask Zachariah what he thinks about this.
Zachariah, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
Thanks for asking, Greg. I agree with Chris that adding some additional hierarchy and sort of verticality to the organizational structure will help, especially as you move up that hierarchy, opening up space to perform, higher levels of strategic planning and organizational leadership. I definitely appreciate the clustering of sort of partner divisions or related divisions. It is indeed very common to see an umbrella department that is referred to as the Community Development Department, or Community and Economic Development, or Development Services. And within that umbrella, you've got Planning and Zoning, Building, in our case, Active Transportation and Trails fits, depending on the approach. Economic development could be in there as well. You might have a specific division for sustainability, but nevertheless, whatever goes under that umbrella, fits because those divisions are closely related to each other and work with each other. We don't have an in-house engineer right now. And so, I think it makes sense for whoever's leading this umbrella department that is being discussed right now. I think it's appropriate for that director to continue managing that contract employee. And I think it's still going to be some time before an in-house engineer is, both viable and warranted, given the costs associated with that. So, yeah, I think that this move makes a lot of sense. And I just have one clarifying question for Chris that we can get to later about some of the structure that he envisions. But generally speaking, I've been pushing for this, for some time. And I would also just reiterate what Chris has said. I think it has less to do with, character or competence or specific employee performance, but rather about what makes sense for the organization.
Okay,
in the
thank
long
you.
run.
That's all, that's all I've got, Mary.
Thank you, Zachariah. Thank you, Greg. Does anyone else have a question or a comment?
I had a question about the structuring. I know when this first came up a week or two ago, we were talking about just kind of trimming out some of the duties from that department and then decreasing that compensation accordingly. But now it kind of sounds more like a mid-level sort of position. And so how does that change any of that kind of stuff moving forward? Was that clear?
Yeah, you know, from my perspective, I hadn't decided on who exactly would lead the department. And so that's part of the reason why, and I think we'll have to discuss this when we get to the action item for the actual job description amendment. I propose, you know, retitling the position as just the planning and zoning director to sort of leave the door open to name a department head of, you know, the head of the community development department if we go that direction. It doesn't necessarily have to be this position. It
But
could be, but it doesn't have to be.
And this, the job description that was forwarded, is this kind of outlining, that was forwarded yesterday, is this outlining the kind of more umbrella position?
No, this is just strictly taking Zachariah's community and economic development director position and retitling it to planning and zoning director and then removing economic development.
Right, okay, that's.
Zachariah indicated he probably missed a few things, but really, you know, the smaller details can be cleaned up. And if we do a reorganization, I'm going to have to comb through lots of different job descriptions to clean them up, which I can do by policy. It's really just these big issues that the council has to decide on. And so at this point in time, the job description amendment doesn't name this position as a community or the community development director. That would be, you know, something down the line. If we establish that department and pulled building inspections in, then we'd have to decide, you know, given our options, who would lead that department. And that's not a decision that I've proposed to make today or with regard to this job description. But I drafted it so that it could be flexible. Like if we called it community development director, then you're kind of stuck that way. But if you call it, if you kind of separate the position from the, you know, the division lead position from the department head position, then you can maintain the option to put, you know, either the chief building official or the planning and zoning director into that role, depending on how it shakes out. And I know, you know, Bill Holst is on the in the meeting also, and invite him to give his opinion as well, if he so chooses to.
Bill, would you like to comment?
I would, and thanks for the opportunity. I personally don't share the opinion. I think the building department and the planning and zoning department worked well before economic development got put into that department. As far as the coordination between the two, there's a lot of other departments that coordinate with planning and zoning more so than I do in the review process of subdivision. Permitting, yes, we do work together with them, but mainly it's their signature line says that they can build what they want to build, and my signature line says that this is how they have to build it. I don't know that putting one of the department heads or division heads in charge of both departments or 3 departments improves any of the situations we have. And in fact, takes away from one of the department's leadership. Because now they're dealing with a whole lot of other issues we have to learn. If it were me per se, I would have to learn the land use code, the legal ramifications around planning and zoning, all their processes for subdivisions in order to be an effective department head. And I would feel that the planning and zoning administrator would have to do the same in order to be an effective department head for building department. I currently hold 16 certifications, actually 17 with floodplain. Between my building department, keeping up my certification, running the department, taking on the floodplain duties, joining the community rating system portion of NFIP, I've got a pretty full plate. I don't think it would be possible to take over community and economic, community development and active trails and transportation and do an effective job. I think sheets isn't always the solution. I would hope we could think.
Is-
We have been working on some solutions with some of the zoning issues that we've been having lately. With software upgrades, trying to get zoning module systems to improve things and streamline things. I think we can work on some process and subdivision review process. And we can get that dialed in. Don't know that there's, in my opinion, there's necessarily a need for restructuring.
This is Zachariah. I don't think anyone heard much of the last minute or two. If it's okay with council, I'd like to just add a follow-up comment.
Could you summarize what, I was unable to understand the last part of what Bill said, and I would like, I don't know, does he want to try to repeat it, or can Chris or some what he said?
I couldn't understand.
Yeah, I think that everybody, Bill, you were kind of garbled at the end there. I don't know, your connection cut out. But I think the gist is that Bill feels like it's unnecessary, the reorganization, and it would be too much work if he were to take that role on as the director of all those divisions. I think that's the gist, I think, of Bill's statement. I'll respond real quick to say that like I say, it's really an upper level issue. It falls on Mallory and I at this point to act as department heads, essentially coordinating not only all of these divisions, but all of them across the whole county. And I think that a big part of the reason why our organizational structure is so inefficient and out of line with best practice is because department heads have been resistant, quite frankly, to establishing a functional, modern, and best practice version of an organization structure. And there's going to be it's going to be tough to make changes like this, but they need to be made. We can't just continue to create this very flat organizational structure where everybody that's in a leadership role reports directly to the administrator's office, because that creates a situation where the administrator's office is constantly dealing with details, always in the weeds, never has the capacity or the overhead or the bandwidth to deal with realizing the council's strategic vision for the county. And that's a big problem. And that's part of the reason why I'd want to see a more cohesive grouping of divisions so that we can establish this mid-level management that frees up the chief executive And you know, we are probably moving in a direction where the county is going to move to having a true executive in the council manager form if the voters move in that direction. And so I think it's important to realize that we want a chief executive to be able to perform the duties of a chief executive, to bring the county into a modern and efficient standard that realizes best practices for the organizational structure. And that's what I'm trying to do here. And I realize it's tough to make changes, but I think they need to be made.
Any other questions or comments? I have a question. So Chris, the inefficiency is that there's not enough communication between the departments before it reaches your office. Is that part of it?
Well, like for instance, you know, Mallory and I have been working with both planning and zoning and the building officials office with regard to their software and the possibilities, for instance, of like project management enhancements to the software that they use, which puts Mallory and I in a position where we are sort of the go-between on all of this. And now we're working on trying to figure out all the details of how does planning and zoning, all the details of that process work? How does it dovetail in with all the details of the building inspector's office and how that works? So we're kind of like filling this role that's really demanding. It takes a lot of our time to try to figure out all these different things when really it should be a department head that's making this cohesion happen and figuring out how to make these two departments dovetail in with each other better. And so, you know, that's something that falls on us because we're acting essentially as the department head, because there is no department head. There's only division managers and no departments.
Mary, I believe Zachariah had some other follow-up too.
Zachariah?
Sure. I mean, I do think that there is, at least within the CED department, there is already some, you know, establishment of divisions within, you know, that department, or at least what's called a department now. You know, we've got our planning and zoning functions. Up until now, we've had our economic development functions. We've got the UMTR liaison and technical inspector. Now we've got the active transportation and trails division. And the active transportation and trails division really does function kind of as its own like independent division. But I would sort of underscore what Bill Holz is saying, that you know, there's not enough capacity with any one of these division directors or division managers right now to oversee their specific unit and serve as a community development director. So my advice to you as the council is, yes, this is the direction that I think you need to go, but don't just make the building official or the planning and zoning director or the active transportation and trails manager the director that oversees the other two divisions as well. First off, that creates kind of a weird dynamic between people who are essentially serving at the same level of you know, division oversight, but you're just adding additional supervisory responsibilities onto their plate and not freeing up any additional capacity for them to do, you know, those higher level strategic functions that the chief executive also needs capacity to do. And so, you know, I definitely support the concept of a community development department with 3 divisions. So you'd have a director of the department and then 3 division managers. You could have a building official or a building manager, a planning manager, and an active transportation and trails manager. But I would push back against the notion that you could just make any one of those division managers simultaneously the department director.
Zachariah, how many did you read off all these divisions? How many did you read off?
that you would-
Oh, well, I mean, just within the existing Community and Economic Development Department, there's the Active Transportation and Trails Division. We've also got the UMTRA Liaison and Technical Inspector. And while the position isn't filled, there's also a code enforcement officer that isn't filled. And, based on budgeting, I don't think it's likely that it would get filled. So that's as things stand currently. But in the sort of structure that Chris is proposing, it sounds like you'd have 3 divisions: building, planning, and active transportation and trails. So those would be 3 divisions under the Community Development Department.
Hey, Mary.
Yes, Curtis. Yes, Curtis, go ahead.
So just want to say real quick, appreciate the opportunity to have this kind of discussion, and definitely in agreement with Chris as far as this is very much organizational structure, and restructuring is very much part of the public's business, and an important reason why a lot of council members get involved and run for office. And I'm personally feeling like the organization in a lot of ways has been hesitant to accept some changes that may make sense on an organizational level. So appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion in kind of an open-minded exploratory context. So a couple things, we do have 2 discussion items here. So we've kind of separated it into 2 parts, but as a whole, the way I see this is we're looking at just kind of refocusing on planning and zoning. We still have economic development, active trails, but I think in the context of focusing on planning and zoning, I think the benefits of having that in the same department, along with engineering, with the building department, is something that's also very common, and something that I'm interested in. Bill has, shared that more or less. My understanding of what Bill has mentioned to me on the subject is he sees value in having a planner that it can also serve as a county engineer, but he doesn't feel comfortable in supervising that person, which is his opinion on the subject. And so, to me, from my background, I see a lot of value in combining, having planning and engineering in the same department as the building department and building inspections. Especially like for council, a lot of the land use code issues we've worked through, in the past few years, both the building department and planning and zoning, those are departments that play an important role in providing feedback and guidance for the council as we look into those kinds of policies. And so having, those 2 departments on the same page, I think is really important just from a policy standpoint, but also for the citizens. If you think about it from the standpoint of, we're having an internal discussion as an organization. At the end of the day, this is the public's offices, right? This is services that are provided for the public by the public's taxpayer dollars, and to be able to provide some streamlining in the public's interaction with the county on issues that pertain to planning and zoning, building department, and engineering. There's a lot of value there. A lot of people that are coming into the county and having to interface with Zachariah, they're also having to go interface with Bill. They're also having to, their work or their endeavor is being impacted by decisions and input from the county engineer. So those things are all very closely related in that regard. And I just wanted to share that, as far as I know, economic development, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I kind of wonder, this is in this agenda item, so this is probably worth a discussion. But if we're talking about restructuring, and consolidating in areas that make better sense, I guess I don't really see if planning and zoning is whether that remains its own office, or does become a part, consolidated with the building department. Active trails, are there other departments in the county where that makes more sense? For instance, sand flats, or even, I think someone can make the argument, that the road department could have some overlap with active trails. And so being that that's in this item, I think that's something we should discuss too. Like, in my opinion, I think active trails may have made sense in Zachariah's department with him serving as department head, but I think if the direction is to enhance our focus or our bandwidth in planning and engineering, active trails may make more sense with sand flats, and doing some slight restructuring over there too. So there's multiple pieces of this, I guess, and so those are just my initial thoughts up front.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you. And any comments or questions?
Yeah, I'll just, I think that all made sense, Curtis, what you were saying. And I think that this discussion is good to kind of shed light. I don't think what anybody is saying is really causing me to cringe too much. I think that going back to the employee study that we had done and the different job descriptions and all that there were positions that were highlighted in the administrator's office. That was kind of something that was underscored in their report, was the number of direct reports that the administrator was overseeing. And I think that there was kind of a commitment to work in that direction of getting, so that people aren't overseeing 12 different individuals. And so, creating some more kind of departments with other divisions makes sense to me. And so I don't know budget wise if this is the time to do that. And so I guess kind of looking at the time, I would be curious in some discussion around the timelines for, if we're not just tasking one individual with more duties, but possibly bringing in a new individual to fill this umbrella role. Is that something that we're talking about posting ASAP, or is that kind of like further down the line, or have people thought about that much?
So, Evan, from my perspective, there's no rush in terms of reorganization. The reason why I put it on this agenda is because when I started redrafting the job description for the Community and Economic Development Director, I kind of ran into a little block where I thought, well, if we just simply call it Community Development Director, then we're kind of on railroad tracks. We lose our option to go a different direction in the future with reorganization. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up in relation to the titling of what I have presented as the Planning and Zoning Director. If we call it Planning and Zoning Director as opposed to Community Development Director, then we're leaving the door open for more options down the road for potential restructuring. And so that's why this is on the agenda now, just because it needs to be talked about in relation to the action item that we do need to move relatively quickly on, because we want to start recruiting to replace Zachariah and not have too big of a gap. I think that department's going to be short-staffed if we're not expedient in recruitment. And so, that's the only big issue, is how to, timeline issue is how do we define that position? And this conversation and this discussion is in relation to that. And so I would just say that we've got time to make the decision about restructuring. That doesn't have to happen anytime soon. But we do need to, if we want options down the road, we need to consider how we define or redefine Zachariah's position and how we title it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And I can definitely see that value in the, having more of the P and Z sort of title, to Curtis's point, when the public is filling out one of these applications, even though they got to get, different signatures from different people, in their mind, it's still one application. And so I see some value in having like one director that's kind of aware of all the different signature lines that are going in on an application. And so in the meantime, if there was a kind of more open-ended kind of P and Z manager for now, and then we got to a point where there was this more mid-level administrator that was more of the community development director, that was the broad umbrella, that totally makes sense to me. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think we have to realize also that there's sort of like the Cadillac, if money were no obstacle, and then there's reality. And so we have to, do the best we can with the resources we have available to us. And so, yeah, it would be great to have like a whole nother separate position as a department head, and then division managers under that person. But we may not have the money for that. And so we'll have to do something else that, accomplishes the reorganizational goal with it, within the resources and the means that we have available to us. And, there's, some models that are fairly successful where departments are run by, a committee of division heads. But, the main thing is to make that grouping of division heads responsible for their own, efficient functioning. And that's the big thing that I'm trying to push, so that Mallory and I are not responsible for the coordination of building inspection and planning and zoning. They themselves are the responsible part to make things work among themselves, and so, and I don't think that it's necessarily the case that whoever the department director has to know every little detail. I don't have to know every little detail to supervise all the departments that I supervise. And so that's not really an essential part of being a manager or a supervisor. But, somebody has to be that person where the buck stops. And at this point, it's sort of on Mallory and I, and not just in these divisions, but on many divisions across the county. And so at some point, if we're going to pull our organizational structure out more vertically, we're going to have to consolidate some of these departments into divisions and classify those groupings of divisions as departments. And that's the way that you do it. And that's the way that we make progress toward a best practice organizational structure.
So Mary, I'll just comment if you don't mind.
Not at all. Thank you.
I agree that our organizational structure is quite flat. And for the purposes of this discussion, I agree that economic development needs to be taken out of that particular job description. I would like to look at the reorganization of the entire county. And I know why it makes sense to do this portion right now, but it would be nice to have it in the context of a larger discussion. And while I'm at it, I'll just throw this out. I like Curtis's idea. I really hadn't thought of active trails and active transportation trails being in sand flats. And I'll throw this other one out. It kind of makes sense since we are such a trails-based tourism economy. It kind of makes sense to me, just off the cuff, to consider putting that in the travel council's department as well. Just consider it. I'm not sold on it or anything, but it did occur to me that that might make sense. That's it.
I do idea, Jerry Lynn, of looking at the whole, this is important. There's a good opportunity now to really do some restructuring in the planning and building such areas. But I think so. It's less. Anyone else?
Hey, Mary, I think, did anybody else, I think we lost what you said. I didn't hear you. You're cutting out.
Am I on mute? Okay, I might have been too far away. I agree with it, and I think we should maybe look at the whole county at some point and not just one department. Am I still cutting out?
No, I heard you that time. No,
Okay,
yeah, and I agree. Like I said, I put this on the agenda because we needed to discuss it in relationship to the action item. There is no expectation that we'll make a restructuring decision anytime soon, but we have to discuss this particular opportunity or restructuring opportunity in the context of the action item for amending the job description. And so, like I say, that's the only reason why it's on the agenda. But the full.
Thank you. Do we feel like we're wrapping up this discussion, or is there more comments and ideas that people want to bring out?
Can you hear me, Mary?
Do we want to wrap this up, or are we ready to and move on to the next item, or is there more people that have more to say?
Mary, can you hear me?
Just real quick, so just a quick question for Chris, if I may.
Yes.
Chris, what's the next step for you? You had emailed out a draft updated job description. Are you wanting a thumbs up on that today or soon, or what's the next steps here so we can keep the ball rolling?
Yeah, so I would like the big items or the items in the job description that the council should be in control over approved today, which would be the title of the position and the removal of the economic development duties. That's really all I need today because I want to start recruiting for that position as soon as possible. And the details of reorganization and the details of the job description, that can be worked out. But I don't really have the authority by policy to make any of the big decisions about anybody's job description. That falls on the council. And so with regard to restructuring, I think that it's a good discussion to get the ball rolling and to have people come up with ideas. Active Trails, Transportation and Trails is already in the same building as Sand Flats, so that makes a lot of sense. And we're talking about potentially bringing on Dalton Wells, and I know the Power Dam area might be heading towards more active management requirements as well. So there's a lot to discuss going down the road in terms of reorganization. I just wanted to bring this particular component of it up because when I changed the title, from Community and Economic Development Director to Planning and Zoning Director, I wanted you to understand why I was doing that. And that's to keep options open for a Community Development Department head role that may or may not be the Planning and Zoning Director position, or maybe a committee of division managers or, something else. But if we simply just removed economic from the Community and Economic Development Director's title, then we're reducing our options for restructuring down the road. And so all I really am asking is just to get that job description approved, leaving our reorganizational options open, and then we'll continue on, discussing reorganization, and hopefully, we can take a more holistic approach to it and and evaluate the county as a whole, or at least the county that falls under the council's jurisdiction as a whole. Does that make sense?
Discussion on the possibilities of restructuring and retitling the Moab Area Travel Council and County Economic Development Department and expanding the duties of such departments to include diversified economy development activities alongside the establishment of tourism, recreation, and film. Chris Fair.
So this also is obviously in relation to the amendment of the Community and Economic Development Director's job description. And Zachariah can go into more detail about a lot of the economic development activities that he's been involved with. You know, looking forward into the future with reduced staffing, COVID-related revenue losses, and making the transition to a new head over there in planning and zoning, and also, you know, some leave time that's probably going to happen with staff. I'm just thinking that there's really little possibility that I think that we'll be able to effectively take care of both planning and zoning and economic development if we don't make some kind of change. And I think, you know, part of the reason why it's over there is because Zachariah took a personal interest in economic development. We don't know necessarily if his replacement will have the same zeal for that activity. But I do know that Elaine Gisler from the Travel Council is very excited about getting involved in diversified economic development. And she's expressed that she's, you know, thinks this is a great opportunity for her and for her office to expand their role. They do economic development all day, every day. They don't have to shift gears in order to do it. They would just, you know, apply their expertise to other realms of industry besides tourism, recreation, and film. So, you know, that, again, this is just a discussion item. We don't have to make any decisions anytime soon. But, you know, that's the direction that I would lean toward. You know, I think that the Travel Council has gotten some flack over the years of being sort of singularly engaged in tourism and tourism only. But that's because that's how they've been set up, you know, and you can't expect them to function any differently unless you change their mission and you provide them with the opportunity to do more. And, you know, this is what I'm proposing. And so, you know, one of the concerns potentially, you know, is that the Moab Area Travel Council is a brand, and it is, and we don't have to give it up. But you have to realize the Moab Area Travel Council is not a legal entity, and it never has been. It's essentially a DBA for Grand County, and so we can continue to use that DBA for our tourism-related promotion. But I do think that it makes sense to broaden our economic development horizons and give more credence to diversification, especially now seeing our weakness associated with something like COVID-19, where a strict tourism and recreation, hospitality related economy more susceptible to major revenue losses than more diversified economies are. I think we've seen some statistics that diversified economies are expected to lose between 6, maybe even up to 10% of their revenue, whereas resort, leisure, and hospitality economies are 25% plus losses. So it's a good time, I think, to consider more seriously economic diversification. And so that's the proposal. Again, it's not something we have to make a decision about, but if we're going to remove economic development from one job position, then, you know, it probably makes sense to begin to discuss right away where to shift it. And in my opinion, the staff over at the Travel Council are by far the most qualified. That's all for now.
Thank you, Chris. Elaine, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I would be looking forward to the opportunity to bring economic development here to the Travel Council. I think the staff, when I have the staff here, they're not on furlough, would be excited as well to take on that additional responsibility. I think we would make a smooth transition from CD to the Travel Council. And at the state level, GOED, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, tourism is in that division. So I think it makes total sense because tourism is economic development. I think we can do a lot with it here. I think we have the ability to market our area like we do for tourism. We can market it for economic development, looking at diversity, which is something we don't have currently. And I think we could begin almost immediately, especially if Zacharias, he's on board till the beginning of August, working with him on projects he's worked on, so that there could be an even smoother transition to bringing that department over to the Travel Council.
Thank you, Elaine. County Council members, do you have questions? Are there any? Doesn't seem
Yeah.
like any. Oh, who's, is that you?
This is Kurt.
Curtis wants to speak.
You've changed rooms.
Yeah, I had to switch. Well, so I think this is a good discussion. I mean, I think that economic development is something that we took on because it's an issue that, most of us feel pretty strongly about. There's a lot of potential there. I can see, some benefits of, kind of building out what's now kind of tourism promotion to include, economic development as a whole. There's a lot of things associated with economic development, and a lot of what, we had an agenda county council meeting probably about a month ago, maybe more, where I had a kind of an item where I wanted to discuss kind of diversification opportunities related to remote professionals. And in the same meeting, we had this presentation from Zachariah regarding this economic development advisory board, and it kind of occurred to me, a lot of what, in some ways we've had to, but there's economic development is a pretty, has the potential, it should be a very broad scope. And it's way more than just facilitating the, grants and incentives and subsidies from the state of Utah. And I think we all know that. But when it comes to, diversification is a very, very difficult thing. It is well above and beyond marketing, with all due respect to the Travel Council. There are communities that have checked every when it comes to infrastructure and community resources, and still struggle to diversify their economy because it's a very difficult thing to do. It is no low-hanging fruit. And so probably what I'm eager to understand is exactly how are we defining economic development? What are those responsibilities and accountabilities, right? What are the measurable objectives? Are we just talking about overseeing the distribution of grants? Are we talking about corporate recruitment? Zachariah's office made progress and emphasized kind of networking and a business conference. They had spearheaded a opportunity zone conference that I think was a really good for a first time event, went really well. There's a lot of different things, in the realm of economic development, and also the economic diversification. I could see somebody just, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week just on that and having a handful. And I don't think we should go in those directions unless we have measurable objectives, and I also don't think that, and I know economic diversification is important to Chris. It's important to a lot of us, but I'd like to see us have some good collective discussion about what does that mean? What are our goals there, and how are we going to get there? And if we'd like to have Grand County as an organization, committed to economic development, what level is that? Because I see a lot of different tiers in there, and when you get into really aggressive recruitment and development, that's a big job, and I don't think we should commit to that unless we have those measurable objectives.
So I guess one thing that I should point out at this point in time, which is unusual and relatable to COVID, we're really in triage mode at this point. I don't think that the planning and zoning staff are going to have the capacity to carry forward even just the grant work that we have going on. And to be quite honest, Elaine doesn't have the staff for it either right now. But what I'm looking at, again, with regard to finding a situation that works to the best of the ability that we have, given the resources we have right now, I feel like, maintaining at least the bare bones GoEd grant programs would be most likely under Elaine at this point in time. And I think I agree that there's a lot more complexity associated with economic development, and possibly down the road when resources improve, and even a more specific job that can be created that's specific to diversified economic development. But given the resources we have right now, I honestly can't guarantee that we'll be able to continue on even with the bare bones economic development stuff, associated with GoEd, business expansion and retention, et cetera. And, given our staffing levels right now. And I'm, saying that I think that the Travel Council staff are the most qualified if we can bring them back on. And obviously we'd have to inject some general fund money into that office in order to fund diversified economic development, because you can't use their part of the TRT for that, and that's sort of a budget discussion down the road as well. But again, we're in triage mode right now. I'm trying to keep some of these basic elements of economic development rolling and running. And I'm really afraid if we don't make the change, we're just going to drop the ball. We won't be able to keep up with it at all. And so right now, I've lowered the standards, I have to say. But I do think in the long run that the more complicated and more aggressive economic development campaigns would work just as well under Elaine. She's she's got a lot of experience and she's got a lot of drive to do it. So I don't have concerns about that. But at this point in time, it's going to be a major challenge just keeping up with the grants.
Thank you. Does that somewhat answer your question, Curtis?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're talking about finding the most appropriate department, to carry the water on the bare bones and the economic development, responsibilities, and it's very much constrained with resources. And so that's probably the more aggressive and intensive economic development stuff is probably a conversation it sounds like we need to be having as our financial situation improves when it improves. So.
May I offer a comment, Mary?
Yes, you certainly may.
So I think this is in the same vein as some of the comments that have been made already, but in terms of a short-term solution, I think that Elaine's office is probably best suited and most prepared to continue some of the efforts that my office and I have established to date. Longer term, I think Curtis is right that the county really needs to have a more involved conversation about how it wants to structure, staff, and support economic development and diversification efforts. And I would also remind you that the city of Moab has a role to play here. In most places, cities serve as the drivers of economic development more so than in counties. Now, that's not entirely true in Utah because there's such a strong emphasis on counties, especially in rural Utah. You don't see that in most states, but in Utah, there is a strong emphasis on counties. But tourism development and promotion is one form of economic development. It's not the sum total of economic development. Elaine gets that. And so, I think as long as the overarching message is, economic development and diversification, in a broader sense, and tourism is one very strong component on that, the county would be in a good position. To Curtis's point, there are obviously many threads to economic development. So it's not just about promotion, and it's not just about supporting businesses that are here. There's workforce development, there's business recruitment. But a note about that, you never get as much job creation or revenue generation from business recruitment as you do from growing businesses that already exist in a community and supporting entrepreneurs that are already in a community. So there's a whole segment of entrepreneurial development. There's networking, partnering with other organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, which has a role to play and I think could use a lot more support from both the city and the county. There's the Small Business Development Center working with USU. And so there absolutely are many threads, and I think that neither the city nor the county have ever, adequately, armed an economic development office to truly diversify our economy. Now we've got, tidbits of success, but as you can see, we will remain vulnerable to global economic disruptions, regional economic disruptions, the longer we remain overly dependent upon one industry that frankly depends on discretionary income and discretionary spending, mass travel, and cheap oil. And unfortunately, only cheap oil is in abundant supply right now, and the other two are not. So I like where this conversation is going, and I think that the short-term solution is appropriate. Longer term, we need to have a more involved conversation. And the recently established Economic Development Advisory Board, I think, can play an increasingly, important role in that.
Mary, you're muted.
You have to unmute, Mary.
Thank you, Zachariah. Anyone else have something to add?
Yes, Mary, can you hear me?
Oh, welcome, Rory.
Hey, sorry it was a little bit late. But I would just like to say I'm okay with the travel council doing it. I think Elaine office could really handle it. I'm just worried that there'll be more of a target on the travel council. I like the idea of eventually maybe putting more eggs in our basket on economic development, you know? So I would like to have more conversation on this.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Mary, may I comment?
You bet.
I agree with Rory. I would like to have more conversation on it. My concerns are Elaine's office seems like their plates are extremely full right now. And so I worry about adding something else. I like Curtis's comments because it articulates what I was feeling, but couldn't really articulate it. We need to define what it is we want. And I know that's part of a larger, longer term conversation, but even in the short term, we need to define exactly what it is that we want to happen to maintain economic development at a basic level. We need to talk with our community partners, USU. They used to do the Bear Grant and the Small Business Summit, and they do have Small Business Development Center, although that director is retiring and it is a part-time job. But I just think we need to look at all of our options. It's very difficult to give responsibilities and more pay and possibly more staff to a department and then take it away when we decide we want to go a slightly different direction. So those are my concerns initially. I think that covers it. Oh, and I was going to say with that Senate Bill 95 or House Bill, I can't remember which, a lot of that funding got yanked. I'm not great with remembering numbers unless they're really important to me, but I believe the $4.5 million extra that was up for competitive grants in economic development in rural counties has been axed, and the guaranteed, pretty much guaranteed 200,000 a year got cut back to, I want to say 95 or 100,000. So I don't know how many grants your office managed, Zachariah, as a result of economic development, but yeah, it's significant. And so there are my jumbled thoughts.
Zachariah, or anyone would you respond?
Sure. You know, to date, one of the challenges that we've faced is that every penny dedicated to economic development has come from a grant. And so that in and of itself creates challenges for establishing a sustainable and effective economic development department. So, you know, the amount of grant funding that we have received and have managed and put to work has grown over the years by several fold. And there are more grants out there. And, you know, frankly, like getting more grant money and putting that grant money to work and managing it is somewhat limited by staff capacity. You know, grant funding is great, but it's only great if you can actually use it and implement it. So that is a big part of it. But going forward, you know, what I've tried to do is also establish some framework for non-grant funding activities, such as through our community reinvestment area, which still is not generating any funds, and then freeing up some staff capacity to focus on economic development, because most of the grants don't cover administrative costs, meaning staff costs. And as you know, you need people to put these plans to work, and Elaine's going to need people. And whoever's after Elaine is going to need people. So there is still grant funding. You are right that the funding that we were thinking would be a real boost from the state this year and in the years to come has been slashed significantly. Some of that funding, I understand, can go to supporting economic development staff, but certainly not all of it, and probably not too much of it if you want to remain competitive in getting that grant money. So, you know, I think to the degree that the Travel Council's source of funding can be leaned on in order to support broader economic development, that's a good thing as well. Elaine and I have talked a lot about tourism as the front door to economic development. You know, find me another business that gets 3.5 million people coming to its doorstep. And so the real trick is, how do you leverage that and create longer term repeat value? And Elaine's got some ideas on that. I've got confidence that she can you know, really hone in on that. But a longer term strategy is still necessary.
Thank you, Zachariah. Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to comment? I'm going to keep my camera off because my, does anyone else have any questions?
So I'll just follow up. Again, this is not something we have to really rush about. And I do agree that it would be nice to get a more comprehensive economic development strategy. But we do have to realize that there are, you know, a handful of opportunities that could be lost if we don't make a decision relatively soon about, you know, some of these basic grants from GoEd, and to switch some of these responsibilities over. And so I wouldn't want to necessarily lose those opportunities because we're waiting to develop, you know, a much broader economic development strategy. I do think we should definitely move forward with that, but I'm just, you know, bringing up that resources are very restricted all across the county, and it doesn't really matter what department you put it in, it's going to be the exact same issue. Nobody's really got the staff to take on additional responsibilities right now, but you know, Elaine is probably the most qualified, you know, of anybody that's going to remain after Zachariah departs, to take on some of this stuff. And I think in the long run, you know, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to retitle the department as Grand County Economic Development Department, and you know, is because I want to manifest that shift in mentality, away from the concept that we're only engaged, you know, in tourism, recreation, and film promotion, but it's a much broader concept. And I think that, you know, it really starts in your head. It starts in how you define your organization, and then things start to grow from there. But like I say, right now we're in a position where our resources are very limited. We don't want to drop the ball on the things that are going on right now. And so, you know, there is a bit of a rush to get those things squared away. And I do think that, you know, Elaine and her staff are probably the best bet for carrying forward.
Mary?
Thank you.
Yeah, I wish we were.
Yes, Greg.
Yeah, you know, we've been talking about Elaine. I'd like to hear from Elaine.
Well, thank you, Greg. I feel confident that this office can maintain what the grant applications and move on that. As Chris said, everything that we can get from the state to help infuse into our county, we can't let that slip by or slip through our hands. I feel, yes, we do need a much bigger strategy for economic development, but at the moment, it is what it is. We're here, we're dealing with our situation, and this pandemic has really, you know, I'm tourism, I'm tasked to bring the tourist here. But when I see how our community has been impacted and the losses and the people that have been affected dramatically by what has happened, we need to have change, and we need to move the needle in a direction that is not totally weighted on hospitality. And I think it's challenging and working with the city. You know, what are they going to do? What are they going to bring to the table? What are we going to do? What are we going to bring to the table? Working with, you know, everyone, the business owners that, you know, I sit on the chamber board. I'm a board member there, not voting, but a board member. And I working closely with the chamber. You know, we did a lot through, our office stepped up and did a lot through the last few months to support our local businesses to help try to force revenue as best we could into their businesses. So I think, yes, we need a larger plan. We need to all come to the table with what that's going to look like and develop. And I see, you know, a committee of the city and the county and the university and everyone gathering together, also working with my counterpart down in San Juan County, where economic development and tourism are in the same office. So, and Natalie, who I have a great relationship with, we work very well together, and we are partners on this end of the state. So what can we do for rural Utah, in southeastern rural Utah? So yes, we need a much bigger focus, but right now we don't have the time to sit down and put a grand plan together. We have to do what we can to immediately bring in revenue, grant revenue into our community, and fast. And then we sit down and then we have all the discussions about where we're going to go. What does that look like? And everybody weighs in on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Anyone else?
Yeah, if I can comment, just want to say
Yes,
that
Gabriel.
I'm supportive of you know, in this, you know, in this imminent, with the imminent needs that are currently fulfilled by economic development, placing that with Elaine's office. And I think it's just based on the conversation that we've had, it's pretty clear that if we want to open it up and take it further, that it's pretty clear that we're going to need more personnel and more sort of weight behind it. And I think that you know, I'm sure that Elaine would, you know, I don't see it as much as then it would be time to take it away from Elaine. It would be more, that would be a time when we would be able to staff up Elaine's office more, and then she, you know, she and other people with experience and expertise would be able to build that conversation up. So I do see that. I see the enthusiasm very clearly with Elaine, and she had an interview on the radio last week, and you know, I definitely saw that enthusiasm there as I do today. And I think that it seems like a really comfortable direction at this point to me.
Thank you, Gabriel. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mary, I have a comment and a question
Yes.
for Elaine. And follow up on Gabe's comments. It could also be, well, that won't make any sense to you, but I was thinking while you were talking that it could also be travel council economic, and the portion that Elaine's office would presumably do could be part of, it could be a department under the Division of Economic Development. So it might not be even building up that staff per se, but you know, it could be, and part of a larger plan. Elaine, my question for you is, given the very sketchy, I don't think we've given you real details on how we would like this to proceed, but given what you can gather from this discussion, could your office do this at this point in time if once they return to work without adding more staff? Does that make sense, that question?
It does. If I was up to full staff here at the office, I do believe that we could facilitate the grant writing and which is most important to secure that funding from the state immediately. And then I think we have to work on a strategic plan. And coming from my former background, I did have a department, but I had divisions of it, the American division, the international division. You know, we had different divisions, and Chris is right. I believe what he says, that structure, because we are so flat. And I think this is an opportunity for us to sort of morph into that and create what we want, what will work best for the county. I think we have to say long-term, you know, what are we looking at for economic development? We're here, and what is, when we bring everyone to the table, you know, the city, the county, every businesses, everyone sitting down and formulating what that strategy looks like and then acting on it. And I feel confident because I sit on the board of the Utah Office of Tourism Development, and which is the division, a division of GOED, that I've got a real chance of talking to people where I can make a difference for Grand County. I want to make a difference for this community. I want this to be my legacy when I leave here, so that we can look back and I can be proud of everything I've done over the years that I've been here. I'll be here 5 years in July, and I've built the, tourism. The pandemic has damaged it some this year. However, I'm not going to let that stand in our way, but I think this is the right move. I feel this is important, and I would work and do my very best to accomplish everything that's good for the county.
Thank you, Elaine. Any further questions?
Mary, it's Renee. Can I make a quick comment?
Renee, yes.
Thanks. So Elaine put on a little bit there that this is her legacy and that she won't always be with the county. And I think by moving economic development under the Travel Council or vice versa, however we structure that, merging these two together gives us the best recruit in the future who has kind of a experience in both these areas and can carry on Elaine's legacy. I have no doubt that Elaine will do a great job in this role, but then further on the road, when Elaine leaves, we're not doing the same type of thing, moving it around to another department to make it make sense. So.
Thank you, Renee. Anyone else? Anyone else? Chris, do you have anything to add in closing this discussion?
I'll just, I can, I guess I'll move forward with transitioning the economic development duties that were contained in Zachariah's position and propose a new job description for Elaine's position and potentially organization there. I guess it's a little bit like nails on a chalkboard to me when I hear people say that they're going to move economic development under the Travel Council, because I see it the other way around. We're going to move Travel Council under economic development.
Right, exactly.
And so, and it's really a major shift in that concept that, tourism prevails above all else, and then, the scraps go to diversification. I mean, we're in a situation, I think, where the TRT strongly outweigh the sources we have for diversification, but it doesn't mean that we can't, in organizational scope, give equal weight to diversification. And so, I can move in that direction, and if council members have further suggestions, we can work on refining it. I do think, like I say, there are some programs and grant opportunities that I really don't want to miss out on. I would hate to try to get that stuff going again. I'd like to keep the momentum up with the things that Zachariah has been engaged with and not lose that inertia And so it'd be good to try to get this wrapped up, you know, in time such that we can make whatever transition we decide on, you know, by August, so that when Zachariah leaves, that we'll know what we're doing and we can make that transition. And so that's kind of the time frame that I'm thinking. It's not immediate. It gives us some time to think about it and to, you know, more clearly define what we mean by economic development. It's a broad concept, and it's going to be restricted by our resources. You know, like I say, we can dream up this really amazing economic development program, but you always have to, you know, ask yourself, can we afford that? You know, is that something that we have the resources to provide? And we always have to live within our means. And anyway, that's all I have to say. And so I'll kind of move in that direction, and we'll see where it goes. And council members can feel free to provide me with any input that you may have as I go.
Thank you. Thank you. Else to say, we move to the next item? We will move to the next item. We are now in the general business action items discussion and consideration portion of our agenda. Item C, discussion and consideration of notifying the Southeastern Utah Health Department of Grand County's preferred COVID-19 phase guideline status and/or other requests regarding COVID-19 mitigations regarding including mandatory face coverings. I would like to discuss the face coverings first, because I know for certain what we decide on this will have an impact on what my thoughts are on changing our present phase guideline. At an International Public Management Association for Human Resource Conference, the attendees learned the following information. Quote, if a COVID carrier isn't wearing a mask encounters a healthy person with a mask, the transition rate is 70%. If a COVID carrier is wearing a mask, encounters a healthy person not wearing a mask, the transmission rate drops to 5%. If a COVID carrier wearing a mask encounters a healthy person with a mask, the transmission rate is 1.5%. When I learned this, it was so amazing to me. I continued and came home and did further research to make sure this quote was correct. It is. For instance, Mario Molina, a Nobel Prize laureate in chemistry, said, wearing a mask is the very best thing, particularly if the recommendation is also to use social distancing. When I learned how wearing a mask protects the people around them more than it protects the mask wearer, my heart went out to our many employees that wear masks but must interact with customers from all over that do not. The employee may not have a choice whether or not to go to work and being infected. Grand County's economy is fragile. We cannot afford huge increases in cases in our county. I do not want to take a step backwards like Florida and Texas have had to do. The best thing we can do for our county is to do all we can do to slow the spread. Wearing face masks is a proven effective way to slow the spread of the virus. Law and policy are among the most effective tools to improve health. Many of the greatest public health successes in the United States are the result of legal or policy intervention, such as smoke-free air laws and mandatory seatbelt laws. There are many places in our country where mask wearing is already mandatory. The governor signed an order that required masks in all state buildings. So many buildings in our town are now requiring masks. Such laws are often difficult to enforce or monitor, such as mandating seatbelt laws. It is very difficult for a person patrolling our highways to make sure all are wearing their seatbelts. Even with the difficulty of enforcement, the Office of Transportation reported that just the law requiring the use of seatbelts on its own resulted in more people wearing seatbelts. By simply passing an ordinance requiring masks will result in more people wearing masks. It will also make it easier for business to ask patrons to wear a mask. They can say it is the law. As our Republican Senator, my majority leader said, we must have no stigma, none, about wearing masks when we leave our homes and come near other people. McConnell said, wearing simple face coverings is not about protecting ourselves. It is about protecting everyone we encounter. Grand County has always stepped forward people need. I think with education and understanding and an ordinance requiring mask wearing, we could slow the process of this COVID-19 down. So that is the reason I am wishing to pass today an order requiring wearing of masks in all public buildings and businesses in Grand County. I'd like to open it up to discussion. Do I have anyone that would like to chime in?
Mary?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
Greg.
Yeah, I would just like to relate to the rest of the people on the council something that happened in my family. My brother came down with COVID. He is a principal. He got it from touching a bowl of peanuts that a contaminated person had previously touched. He came home. He didn't know he had it. He gave it to his wife. He gave it to his 4-year-old daughter. The biggest part that was he's currently recovering, but the biggest part that shook up our family was that before he realized he had it, he visited my 87-year-old mother and my sister, who is diabetic, and her children that have some medical problems. The only thing that saved them was that everyone was wearing a mask and they visited my mother outside. So between wearing the mask and being outside, my mother and my sister and my nephews and nieces didn't get it. And that was the only thing that saved them. Because my brother and his wife spent upwards of 6 hours each in the emergency room trying to breathe. And that's reality. So
thank you, Greg.
Yeah,
I'd
just like to say that wearing a mask is a very, very small thing to do to maintain our health and economic viability.
Thank you, Greg. Is there anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to go, Mary.
Yes.
I just want to say that I strongly feel that we need to stay the course. It's so important that we keep this thing leashed as much as possible. This constitutes, to me, proactive, active action rather than hoping that it's not going to have another sort of have a devastating effect on our economy. I think about maintaining confidence all around, not just with economic activity via visitation into town, but just our residents feeling comfortable purchasing and supporting local businesses. I think about the school district making their, going through their decision to get our kids back in school this fall, and how terrible it would be if we didn't take this opportunity to take proactive action to potentially limit the spread of this virus in such a way. And if we didn't do that, and that caused further delays or restrictions to the beginning of the school year, in addition to the peak economic activity that we see in the fall. Furthermore, just keeping our residents going to work. We have a nursing home facility here in town that still, they have, since the beginning, since the outset of this virus, they haven't had visits from their closest loved ones since March. And unless we continue to build confidence, and keep, hopefully keep this thing tamped down, that period of time for those folks to be able to see their loved ones is going to continue to lengthen. It just seems it's the right thing to do at this point.
Thank you, Gabriel. Anyone else?
Yeah,
Yes.
Mary, I would like to speak.
Yes, Roy.
Well, I've had a few people come up to me and talk to me about some stuff, and I would like to just say, they're saying, have we had an overabundance of COVID cases where the hospital can't handle it? And if so, why are we working harder on our hospital and getting more stuff that we can take care of people? Also, we're already hurting at our business, and I just see that this is going to cause a lot of problems with visitors and employees. Let's see. How are we going to make sure that these people are wearing their mask, and if they're wearing them correctly? Because everybody that I've seen is not doing it the correct way. Are we going to teach them how to do it? And my thing is why don't we tell people if they're sick, stay home? Like, this is, to me, just seems like a lot of common sense. The other thing is people are asking me, since our businesses are going to be struggling and we're already taking more away from them, how are our taxes going to be handled this year? They're more concerned about that because they're worried about how they're going to be able to pay their taxes. These are just some of the questions I have. I don't support this. And so.
Mary, I would just weigh in that I would like to continue to support our businesses and our economy as a whole staying open. And I think that having face masks in place as we see this rise in cases happening locally is a good move. And I would support the face mask requirements indoors.
And Mary, I'll go ahead and comment, or else you can first, Curtis. Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. I'm kind of torn on this, only because in a perfect world, in an ideal world, people would wear masks already because it's the right thing to do. It's to protect themselves and protect others. And the data back universal mask wearing during the pandemic. Early on, models were kind of mocked, but it turns out the models that they were creating that predict about 3 months out, they've actually turned out to be very accurate. And I was looking at a site last night, the IHME site, and they have got models predicted out for the next 3 months, takes you to the end of September. And I looked at their page for Utah on deaths. And if we continue on, I was going to share my screen, but I don't think that's necessary. If we continue on as is, we pretty much double the number of deaths in Utah, rather than we would have like 200 more deaths. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it is double what we could expect if we had universal mask wearing, which would only bring 100 new deaths. It'd be way easier to share the screen, but I'm not going to do it. And then if you look at daily cases projected out to 3 months, going on as we are now, it's projected that we will by then have around an average of 660 infections, daily infections by that time, and also during those same 3 months. And then if we have universal mask face covering requirements, that number can be cut to about 52 daily infections by the end of September. And to me, those numbers speak, and this site has been really accurate in predicting how this thing would play out so far. Add that to look at Japan. They have 126 million people. That's nearly 40 times the population of Utah. And that 126 million people are crammed into a space that's roughly the size of California, yet they only have 18,000 cases. Utah, with our small population, has already, we've surpassed them a long time ago, 22,000. So we've got 40 times, they've got 40 times their population, and we've already surpassed their cases. Much of the discussion says that that's because they're already used to wearing masks. You go to Japan or even watch Asian people in this country, if they have a cold or a cough or anything, they are wearing a mask. So even though they're crowded onto these subways, so that standing room only, you could, in some cases, lift your feet up and not move. It is so crowded. They all wear masks, and their transmission rate has been phenomenally low. We have added 2 cases today. I was on the health department's website, and so that's 4 in the last week of new coronavirus cases in our community. So I'm only on, I think universal mask wearing requirement is the way to go. I was only on the fence because I would like people to do it voluntarily, but we've had the last month or 6 weeks to decide whether or not we're going to do it voluntarily, and it doesn't look like that's happening. So I think I would support this as well.
And Mary? Mary's gone. I'm just going to talk then. So just for clarification, we've got 2 different issues that we're discussing here. We've got a discussion and consideration to notify Mr. Bradford and the Southeastern Utah Health Department of our preferred COVID-19 phase guideline status. And then we've got this issue of masks. So it might be helpful if we kind of tackle those individually, just for kind of clarification for ourselves and the public. This is an evolving circumstance. We're getting new data every day, trying to make the best decisions we can from the data. We received an email last week that was included in the packet from Mr. Bradford in the health department that it indicated that due to the facts at that juncture last week, I'm not sure which day specifically it was that we met the criteria to advance to the green guideline status, phase guideline status. Question for Mr. Bradford, of course. How much have things changed in a week? We're just because of our meeting that we scheduled today, we weren't able to really deliberate on your email outside of a public meeting, of course, and so we're just kind of getting to this today. So one of the goals, I think, is to kind of indicate our position as a county council on whether we would like to advance to green or remain in yellow, if I'm understanding that correctly. So I guess the question then, Braden, is what's changed? You know, what's your counsel to the council? You know, what does the circumstance look like today compared to where we were last week when you sent that email?
So obviously we have had a total of 4 new cases within the last 4 or 5 days. That's the only change of substance. And though that is of significance to us in the county, all of the other metrics, and even up to including that metric, still qualify Grand County to move to green. With that being said, the governor did mention that that there will be no consideration for any county to move for another week and a half. He indicated last Wednesday, I believe, that they weren't going to consider anything for 2 weeks from that date. So there is a little bit of time to continue to gather data and evaluate it, particularly if there's another council meeting scheduled before that, you know, within the next little while. Because even if it was submitted today, if the council voted to go green, it wouldn't go into consideration until July. I don't have the exact date. It's about 11th for effect a few days after that. So that's really the update, is that the qualification is still there, but the governor does want to understand the desire of the council as well. And from a health department standpoint, we really could support either one, even though we understand Grand County and Moab is in a unique position. That's been a lot of the discussion since the beginning of this process.
So then, thanks for that, Braden. A suggestion for the council is if we have some more time, from the state of Utah and the governor's office before they're going to consider any changes to the phase guideline positions by the county, why don't we take some more time to assess the data and collect more data? I don't personally see the usefulness of taking a position on prematurely if it's not going to, play into, I guess it just makes more sense to deliberate on this when it's time to make a decision. And especially since the data evolves every day. So.
Braden, can I ask you to just highlight, it gets a little bit hard to keep score between yellow and green. Can I ask you to highlight the key differences there in what that transition would mean for Grand County?
Yeah, some of the key once you transition to green, there are no real limitations on group sized gatherings. Essentially all of if you look at the guidance now, there's outdoor recreation, indoor business, restaurants, hotels, it's broken down into all of these different sections. Really, once you go to green, there's one set of recommendations for each of those areas that says practice social distancing, wear a mask when you're, when you can't appropriately social distance, and it has another series of recommendations that are kind of seared into our brains at this point. Wash your hands, try not to meet in large groups in a room for a long period of time. So in essence, green removes any of those restrictions on the area, within the area that the green becomes effective. Within yellow, we still have, for example, a random gathering of people can go up to 50. And then if there's an organization that is taking charge and is accountable for implementing practices that will encourage social distancing and keep a register of who has been at a certain event, for example, those group sizes can increase, but there are still limitations on them. There are a few restrictions placed on restaurants. They're one of the ones that are majorly impacted, that it still has distance between tables and such, and really encourages takeout dining. We've seen a lot of people in their mind transition to green, though since Utah has opened up a little bit more and we've seen this surge in cases, we've actually seen a little bit increased compliance, as people are in the grocery store and shopping and coming into businesses. Southeast Utah, at least I know up in Carbon County, is very poorly compliant. Grand County has scored a little bit better as for example, news agencies have gone out and just done a rough count of how many people are wearing face coverings in a store. Recreationally, it opens up pools. I'm jumping back and forth a little bit as things come to mind. Pools and outdoor events are always encouraged, but there's really no restrictions on those. Those are kind of the highlights. I'd need to really go through and have the guidance in front of me to do a more thorough job, but.
Hey, Braden, can you tell me out of those 4, how many were wearing masks, and if they weren't wearing masks, or what their situation was? Can you tell us that?
From my understanding, so one of them is a seasonal employee that had visited another hotspot area and came in and started to show symptoms. The other, I'm not totally sure, but it's my understanding they weren't wearing masks. The other 3 that are connected, they're a very similar, well, it's one common exposure between the other 3. It's my understanding they weren't wearing masks, but at least for that exposure period.
Sorry, I got a little turned around there with the discussion about the deadlines. I thought that there was a 5 p.m. Tuesday deadline that we were aiming to address.
So as was mentioned, there are two issues to be discussed. One is the potential to apply to shift to the new normal green phase. That the governor indicated they're not considering any changes for another essentially 2 weeks. So there is some time on that one. There is a possibility if the council votes, the The health department would then submit a letter to the governor as a request for a variance to allow the council to put into place a temporary order for face coverings in Grand County. That would be reviewed. So that could be submitted tonight by 5 o'clock to be reviewed on Thursday with the governor and the Economic and Public Health Emergency Commission. But, and you know, that can be this Tuesday, that can be next Tuesday. Just at the time we had originally, I submitted the information that said Grand County could go green. We did not yet know that the governor was putting those reviews on hold, but reviews for other variances are still a possibility.
Madam Chair, if I may. Seeing that the governor would not be entertaining requests to change the status, I would make a motion that the additional requirement of mandatory face coverings indoor be sent to the governor's office requesting that status.
I'll second it.
Did we lose our chair? I would move that the vice chair takes over the meeting.
I'm sorry. I didn't want the noise in the background. I forgot I muted. So
Gotcha.
Evan made a motion to send a letter to the governor requesting that Grand County be allowed to make face coverings mandatory.
Second.
And Greg seconded. We will have a roll call vote.
More discussion?
Any more discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know what is the fine going to be when people aren't wearing masks?
We will have to develop the order once we get the permission to do so. And so then
Okay.
during the order, that's when it would be decided.
And the other thing is,
My daughter,
we're
Excuse
6
me?
minutes past 5 o'clock, so we missed the deadline.
well, we can do it tomorrow. Anyway, yes, Curtis?
So are we wanting to include, I asked the question, do we want to just cross that bridge when we get there as far as, if we want to stay in yellow or go green, or do we want to include that in the motion or what? I think it'd be good to have some resolution on how we plan to address that position before we, potentially there's an opportunity to take a position on that prior to that. I think Brady said July 11th.
I think it would be good to have that as a single motion for our Tuesday meeting, because that would give us, we would still be in the timeline that we could anyway.
And that's a week from today, right?
No, it's next Tuesday. Yes, a week from today. Yes.
Okay, so we're just gonna take a position on a recommendation to the governor regarding the mandatory masks
Yes.
today. All right, well, just a quick comment. We've gotten a lot of emails on this from citizens. There's a lot of information on both sides of it too. I've been reading a lot of data about the reduction in oxygen levels with masks and liability and concerns related to that. I think across the country, we're seeing governmental organizations kind of taking the position of a very strong recommendation to wear masks. At this point, I don't think it's a matter of not taking COVID seriously if you're not in favor of mandatory masks, because that is there's a lot there in terms of debating the rationale and the benefit there. I'm not personally comfortable to support that mandate at this point. No further comments.
Okay, we did get a lot of response on this, and I went back and categorized, and we had 47 emails in support and 17 against. So I will call for a vote. Curtis Wells? If there's no further discussion, is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll call for a vote.
Mary?
Curtis? Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
So it feels odd to me to vote on a recommendation when we don't have a document in front of us, a resolution or whatever. So and since the governor is not, so he's considering any other recommendations, but he's not considering changing colors at this point in time. Is that correct, Brady? Okay. Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Okay, so Curtis votes no.
Sorry,
Jay Lynn?
Sorry, I have one more comment just that I think is important to make.
Okay.
Looking around at mask requirement orders from the state, there are stipulations in these orders that do account for individuals' psychological and physical, needs with regards to mask wearing, and they do speak to that. So I think it's important to really state that the intention of this wouldn't be to endanger folks' health through this type of measure. I think it's important to say.
And I spoke to Brady earlier today, and he said that to request the governor's office can be very simple, and then the wording for the order can be worked out later, and we could approve the order or on at a later date. Is that correct, Brady?
Yeah, and in particular, I just got word back from Summit County. They implemented their order on June 26th, and they've learned a few things, and so have made adjustments for children up to the age of 12. There are some limitations there for strenuous exercise. There's a few other things that they are going to adjust in their order that will that could potentially help Grand County and the health department craft something a little bit more amenable to those that have certain issues. And Salt Lake County is reviewing theirs as well to see what changes might need to be put into their order.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, now no further discussion. I will call for a vote. I vote, Mary McGann votes yes. Evan Clapper,
Yes.
Curtis Wells,
Hey,
no. Jalen Hawks,
Yes.
Gabriel Wojtek,
Yes.
Rory Paxman,
No.
Greg Halliday.
Yes.
Passes 5-2 to send a request for Grand County to create an order to have face coverings mandatory. Thank you. Our last order of business is discussion on the possibility of restructuring and retitling the Moab Area Travel Council to Grand County Economic Development Department and expanding the duties of such departments to include diversified economic development activities alongside the establishment of tourism, recreation, and film. Do I have a motion?
Mary, where are you on the agenda?
We're on number D, approving amended job description.
Yeah, so the job description, hopefully we're all on the same agenda here, but should read approving amended job description for community and economic development director position to remove economic development duties, retitle, reclassify the pay grade from 20 to 18 and authorize recruitment.
Oh, okay, thank you. I must have had an order. So that's what we're on, approving amended job description.
So yeah, this has nothing to do with travel council or anything like that. So yeah, this is just strictly amending the current community and economic development director position as I sent out to the council. And so the title that I proposed is planning and zoning director, but that could be, changed. Zachariah, I think, mentioned that he likes the term manager better if it's not going to be ultimately a department head. But that's sort of a nomenclature issue. The main points to discuss, I think, are the obvious one of removing the economic development components out of the job description, and then also the change in grade. So I'm proposing a reduction in grade from 20 to 18. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure how big a difference market-wise we would see if we tried to compare this particular position with economic development responsibilities versus not having them. From a market perspective, it's probably going to be pretty similar. But when we were going through the process of establishing the market grade for Zachariah's community and economic development director position, it was really just right in the middle of a 19 and a 20 and just barely tipped the scales toward 20. So, I think that reducing it down to 18 still will keep it relatively competitive, in my opinion. But that's, up for discussion as well.
Discussion.
Mary, this is
Yes.
Kurt. I'd like
Yes,
to make
Kurt.
I'd like to make a motion at this
Thank you,
going.
Curtis.
I would move that we approve the amended job description to remove economic development duties, reclassify the pay grade from 20 to 18, and retitle it, I guess for purposes of this motion, Chris had said planning and zoning director, Zachariah preferred manager. What's your preference on that, Chris, for purposes of the motion, just to get us some?
I haven't really thought about it that much. I guess we could always change it before we hire the person. I don't know that they would necessarily, the applicants probably don't care whether it's term director or manager. So maybe I don't think it really matters at this point. If we decide we want to change it before we hire the person, then, that's a pretty easy thing to do.
Okay. So how about for purpose of the motion, we just have the title to be determined prior to the hiring?
Well, we have to advertise it though when we recruit. And so we'll have to have something to advertise. So let's just go with planning and zoning director for now. And then, because changing to the term manager, as Zachariah suggests, is a component of much broader overall reorganizational effort where we would be taking what we're considering departments now, reclassifying them as divisions, and then grouping them into departments. And so since we haven't really done that yet or decided that that's what we're going to do, I would just leave the term director at this point, and then later we might, begin to reterm those division leaders as managers instead, but we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay, so Mary, just to rephrase the motion, my motion is to approve the amended job description for the current Community and Economic Development Director position to remove economic development duties, retitle Planning and Zoning Director, reclassify the pay grade from 20 to 18, and authorize recruitment.
Motion made
Second.
by, seconded by, was that Evan?
Seconded by Evan Clapper.
Okay, motion by Curtis Wells, seconded by Evan Clapper. Discussion? I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Jalen Hawks,
Yes.
Greg,
Aye.
Gabriel Wojtek,
Yes.
Evan Clapper,
Yes.
Mary McGann, yes. Motion passes unanimously. We have
Okay,
reached, yes,
Mary,
yes.
at the end of that motion, don't you have to say and have the chair sign all associated documents?
We changed in the policies that that's not necessary anymore.
Okay,
It's in the policies. Okay, motion passes unanimously. We have reached the end of our agenda, so I will adjourn this meeting.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Nice work, team.
Yes.